you mentioned the elephant and the monkey riding the elephant, and consciousness is the monkey, and there's some prodding that the monkey gets to do, and sometimes the elephant listens. I heard you got into some contention. Maybe you can correct me, but I heard you got into some contentious free will discussions. Is this with Sam Harris or something like that?
Not that I know of.
Some people on Clubhouse told me you made a bunch of big debate points about free will. Well, let me just then ask you, where in terms of the monkey and the elephant, do you think we land in terms of the illusion of free will? How much control does the monkey have?
We have to think about what the free will is in the first place. We are not the machine. We are not the thing that is making the decisions. We are a model of that decision-making process.
Yeah.
And there is a difference between making your own decisions and predicting your own decisions.
Yes.
And that difference is the first-person perspective. And what basically makes decision-making under conditions of free will distinct from just automatically doing the best thing is that we often don't know what the best thing is. We make decisions under uncertainty. We make informed bets using a betting algorithm that we don't yet understand because we haven't reverse engineered our own mind sufficiently. We don't know the expected rewards. We don't know the mechanism by which we estimate the rewards and so on.
But there is an algorithm.
We observe ourselves performing, where we see that we weigh facts and factors and the future, and then some kind of possibility, some motive gets raised to an intention. And that's informed bet that the system is making. And that making of the informed bet, the representation of that is what we call free will. And it seems to be paradoxical because we think that's the crucial thing is about it, that it's somehow indeterministic. And yet, if it was indeterministic, it would be random. And it cannot be random because if it was random, if just dice were being thrown and the universe randomly forces you to do things, it would be meaningless. So the important part of the decisions is always the deterministic stuff. But it appears to be indeterministic to you because it's unpredictable. Because if it was predictable, you wouldn't experience it as a free will decision.
Right.
You would experience it as just doing the necessary right thing. And you see this continuum between the free will and the execution of automatic behavior when you are observing other people. So, for instance, when you are observing your own children, if you don't understand them, you will use this agent model where you have an agent with a set point generator, and the agent is doing the best it can to minimize the difference to the set point, and it might be confused and sometimes impulsive or whatever, but it's acting on its own free will. And when you understand what happens in the mind of the child, you see that it's automatic. And you can outmodel the child, you can build things around the child that will lead the child to making exactly the decision that you're predicting. And under these circumstances, like when you are a stage musician or somebody who is dealing with people that you sell a car to, and you completely understand the psychology and the impulses and the space of thoughts that this individual can have at that moment. Under these circumstances, it makes no sense to attribute free will. Because it's no longer decision-making under uncertainty. You are already certain. For them, there's uncertainty, but you already know what they're doing.
But what about for you? So is this akin to like systems like cellular automata, where it's deterministic, but when you squint your eyes a little bit, it starts to look like there's agents making decisions at the higher sort of, when you zoom out and look at the entities that are composed by the individual cells, even though there's underlying simple rules that make the system evolve in deterministic ways, it looks like there's organisms making decisions. Is that where the illusion of free will emerges? That jump in scale?
It's a particular type of model, but this jump in scale is crucial. The jump in scale happens whenever you have too many parts to count and you cannot make a model at that level, right. And you try to find some higher level regularity. And the higher level regularity is a pattern that you project into the world to make sense of it. And agency is one of these patterns, right? You have all these cells that interact with each other, and the cells in our body are set up in such a way that they benefit if their behavior is coherent, which means that they act as if they were serving a common goal.
Right.
And which that means that they will evolve regulation mechanisms that act as if they were serving a common goal. And now you can make sense of all these cells by projecting the common goal into them.
Right. So for you, then, free will is an illusion.
No, it's a model and it's a construct. It's basically a model that the system is making of its own behavior. And it's the best model that it can come up with under the circumstances. And it can get replaced by a different model, which is automatic behavior, when you fully understand the mechanism under which you are acting.
Yeah, but another word for model is what? Story. So it's the story you're telling. I mean, do you actually have control? Is there such a thing as a you? And is there such a thing as you having control? So, like, are you manifesting your evolution as an entity?
In some sense, the you is the model of the system that is in control. It's a story that the system tells itself about somebody who is in control.
Yeah.
And the contents of that model are being used to inform the behavior of the system.
Okay.
So the system is completely mechanical,
mm-hmm.
and the system creates that story like a loom, and then it uses the contents of that story to inform its actions and writes the results of that actions into the story.
So how is that not an illusion? The story is written then. Or rather, we're not the writers of the story.
Yes, but we always knew that.
No, we don't know that. When did we know that?
I think that's mostly a confusion about concepts. The conceptual illusion in our culture comes from the idea that we live in physical reality
mm-hmm.
and that we experience physical reality and that we have ideas about it.
Yep.
And then you have this dualist interpretation where you have two substances, res extensa, the world that you can touch and that is made of extended things, and res cogitans, which is the world of ideas. And in fact, both of them are mental representations. One is the representations of the world as a game engine that your mind generates to make sense of the perceptual data. And
that's
the other
one,
world, yes, that's what we perceive as the physical world. But we already know that the physical world is nothing like that, right? Quantum mechanics is very different from what you and me perceive as the world. The world that you and me perceive is a game engine.
Yeah.
And there are no colors and sounds in the physical world. They only exist in the game engine generated by your brain. And then you have ideas that cannot be mapped onto extended regions, right? So the objects that have a spatial extension in the game engine are res extensa, and the objects that don't have a physical extension in the game engine are ideas. And they both interact in our mind to produce models of the world.
Yep, but, when you play video games, I understand that what's actually happening is zeros and ones inside of a computer, inside of a CPU and a
mm-hmm.
GPU, but you're still seeing the rendering of that, and you're still making decisions whether to shoot, to turn left, or to turn right if you're playing a shooter. Or every time I start thinking about Skyrim and Elder Scrolls and walking around in beautiful nature and swinging a sword, but it feels like you're making decisions inside that video game. So even though you don't have direct access in terms of perception to the bits, to the zeros and ones, it still feels like you're making decisions, and your decisions are actually feels like they're being applied all the way down to the zeros and ones.
Yes.
So it feels like you have control, even though you don't have direct access to reality.
So there is basically a special character in the video game that is being created by the video game engine.
Yeah.
And this character is serving the aesthetics of the video game. And that is you. Yes,
but I feel like I have control inside the video game. Like all those 12-year-olds that kick my ass on the internet.
So when you play the video game, it doesn't really matter that there's zeros and ones, right? You don't care about the width of the bus. You don't care about the nature of the CPU that it runs on. What you care about are the properties of the game that you're playing. And you hope that the CPU is good enough.
Yes.
And a similar thing happens when we interact with physics. The world that you and me are in is not the physical world. The world that you and me are in is a dream world.
How close is it to the real world, though?
We know that it's not very close, but we know that the dynamics of the dream world match the dynamics of the physical world to a certain degree of resolution. But the causal structure of the dream world is different. So you see, for instance, waves crashing on your feet, right? But there are no waves in the ocean. There's only water molecules that have tangents between the molecules that are the result of electrons in the molecules interacting with each other.
But aren't they like very consistent? We're just seeing a very crude approximation. Isn't our dream world very consistent, like to the point of being mapped directly 1-to-1 to the actual physical world, as opposed to us being completely tricked? This is like where you have like Donald.
It's not a trick. That's my point. It's not an illusion. It's a form of data compression.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to deal with the dynamics of too many parts to count at the level at which you're entangled with the best model that you can find.
Yeah, so we can act in that dream world, and our actions have impact in the real world, in the physical world.
Yes.
To which we don't have access.
Yes, but it's basically like accepting the fact that the software that we live in, the dream that we live in, is generated by something outside of this world that you and me are in.
So is the software deterministic, and do we not have any control? So do we have... So free will is having a conscious being. Free will is the monkey being able to steer the elephant.
No, it's slightly different. Basically, in the same way as you are modeling the water molecules in the ocean that engulf your feet when you are walking on the beach as waves, and there are no waves, but only the atoms and more complicated stuff underneath the atoms and so on. And you know that, right? You would accept, yes, there is a certain abstraction that happens here. It's a simplification of what happens, and a simplification that is designed in such a way that your brain can deal with it temporally and spatially in terms of resources, and tuned for the predictive value. So you can predict with some accuracy whether your feet are going to get wet or not.
But it's a really good interface and approximation.
Yes,
it's like E equals MC squared is a good... Equations are a good approximation for... Or they're much better approximation. So to me, waves is a really nice approximation of what's all the complexity that's happening underneath.
Basically, it's a machine learning model that is constantly tuned to minimize surprises. So it basically tries to predict as well as it can what you're going to perceive next.
Are we talking about which is the machine learning, our perception system or the dream world?
The machine world is dream world is the result of the machine learning process of the perceptual system.
That's doing the compression.
Yes. And the model of you as an agent is not a different type of model, or it's a different type, but not different as in its model-like nature from the model of the ocean, right? Some things are oceans, some things are agents. And one of these agents is using your own control model, the output of your model, the things that you perceive yourself as doing. Mm-hmm. And that is you.
What about the fact that it's like when you're standing and with the water on your feet and you're looking out into the vast, like open water of the ocean, and then there's a beautiful sunset, and the fact that it's beautiful, and then maybe you have like friends or a loved one with you, and like you feel love. What is that? As the dream world, or what is that?
Yes, it's all happening inside of the dream.
Okay. But see, the word dream makes it seem like it's not real.
Yeah, of course it's not real. The physical universe is real, but the physical universe is incomprehensible and it doesn't have any feeling of realness. The feeling of realness that you experience gets attached to certain representations where your brain assesses this is the best model of reality that I have.
So the only thing that's real to you is the thing that's happening at the very base of reality, like...
for something to be real, it needs to be implemented. So the model that you have of reality is real in as far as it is a model, right? It's an appropriate description of the world to say that there are models that are being experienced. Mm-hmm. But the world that you experience is not necessarily implemented.